think on the concept of unified reporting, we heard from over 70 individuals that testified on that concept. And both of those bills that were proposed never even got voted out of committee. And back then we were facing what was at least a $6.5 billion deficit. Why were those bills not voted out when we were faced with such extreme deficits? I think the committee recognized how devastating those areas would be to touch. And so what we've done here today is we've picked up all those items that we thought were sacred after all those public hearings, and we threw them into a tax package without any conversation from Finance Committee members or from the general public. I know on the combined reporting alone, that was a very complicated topic that we took many hours to try to figure out. It's questionable whether it will actually translate to a gain in revenue. One thing I found interesting is back in '09 when it was such a hot topic, I think it was a hot topic because Maryland took up the issue. And what Maryland did was required our businesses there to report in a unified fashion, but they just required the reporting. They didn't actually require the payment of the tax. And to this day, they have not adopted the unified reporting as a requirement. Because I think the fear is that these companies, they may leave, but it actually could result into a revenue loss for a state. It's not necessarily translating to a revenue gain. And I feel that that concept alone is a tough gamble. But for us to do it without a public hearing and to truly understand it, I don't know if this proposal is vertically collapsing companies that have 100% interest in ownership. Is it 80% interest in ownership? Is it 50% interest in ownership? The revenue number that's attributed to it is, 23 million. Back in 2009, it was pegged at about 80 to 90 million. So there may or may not be a policy change, but I don't know where that comes from. The data processing, increasing the sales tax on data processing from 1% to 6 3/5%, that was a tax that was supposed to expire. It was put on the books and was slowly being phased out. I think in part for one of the reasons, when we looked at it in '09, we thought that, we should be taxing iTunes or music and digital downloads like e-books. We all believe that that creates parity. So I think we were willing to take a look at that concept. When we looked at it, we realized it goes far beyond just consumer purchases of electronic software. It hits our businesses. That translates into jobs. I know ESPN, back when that bill was on the table, had testified how it could potentially cost millions. Back then, they were looking at expanding in Connecticut, and we pulled that off the table because we knew that that would translate into a massive job loss. But here we see it resurrected without any discussion, without any members of the public to be able to respond. And I guess where I get frustrated, and I think a little caught off guard, I mean, I know we're hitting a recession, but we are having a different conversation in this committee. We created the tax panel last year to start comprehensively looking at our tax scheme. We saw the volatility revenue bill that Comptroller Lembo has pushed, that many of us on the committee have endorsed. In particular, it focuses on the fact that our capital gains, our unearned income tax, is very difficult to predict. Many of our deficits in '03 and '09 were all attributed to the stock market. And that's a great bill to begin to soften the blows of those revenue cycles. But what do we do here today? We slap a tax on it. It's doing the exact opposite of what that bill seeks to accomplish. And all that's going to happen is we're going to be back in the same boat 4 years from now or 2 years from now, even next year, because these are not revenues that we're going to be able to rely upon. I mean, I think in part we're leaving the alcohol alone, thank goodness, because we're not seeing a real big increase in alcohol, and we don't want to do any more harm to that industry. But I got to say, our unearned income receipts are coming in. We're $135 million off for the end of the year. $135 million that we're going to have to make up in this budget cycle. And we put a tax on that this year? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I find this document highly frustrating, and I do find it offensive to my core. Thank you.